All right, everyone, the meeting of the Committee of the Whole, Planning and Administration is now called to order. I'd ask that you rise as you're able for the reading of the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us so that we may continue to do the work we must in their memory. Have a seat. Clerk, if you wouldn't mind taking the roll.
Counselor Samwell? Here. Counselor Hunt? Present. Counselor Martin?
Here.
Counselor Caputo?
Present.
Mayor Davis?
Present.
Counselor Van Tilborg?
Here.
Counselor Carpenter?
Here.
Counselor McCreary?
Here.
Counselor Sless?
Present.
Counselor Sullivan?
Present.
And Counselor Sicoli.
I am here. Thank you. Members of the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest on any of the items appearing on the agenda? Counselor Van Tilburg.
6.1.2, just like in the zoning, I have a property in my family that's adjacent to it.
Thank you. Noting Counselor Van Tilburg's conflict on 6.1.2, that item will automatically be separated. Any other items to be considered for separation? Oh, did I jump ahead? Just here. Just that first part. Oh, gotcha. Okay, so please note that we've received a late delegation registration for item 6.1.4 regarding 32 Bridge Street, which requires a motion to waive the rules to permit the delegate. So are you moving that, Counselor McCreary, seconded by Mayor Davis? Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, if you would call the vote, noting that this motion requires a 2/3 result.
The motion to waive the rules to allow the delegation is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Counselor Sicoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, McCreary, Hunt, Carpenter, Samwell, and Van Tilborg.
Perfect, thank you. And now I'm going to ask if any members of the committee have any items that they would like to separate for discussion purposes. Counselor Van Tilburg.
6.1.1.
And Counselor McCreary.
That was my separation as well.
Okay. Seeing no others. Oh, Counselor Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 6.2.1, please.
Okay. And seeing no others, Counselor Martin, could you please move the approval of all items for consideration?
Certainly. I move, seconded by Counselor McCreary, that all items for consideration, items 6.1 and 6.2, not separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
Perfect. And clerk, if you could please read the titles, and then we'll call for the vote.
Subject to this vote is item 6.1.3, Greyfields Community Improvement Plan Budget for the Administration of Capital Funded Grant Programs. 6.1.5, Temporary Delegated Authority Update Lame Duck. 6.2.2, Receiving of all minutes.
Oh, Counselor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, on my screen, it shows as 6.1.4 as my conflict. It's 6.1.2.
Sorry, I'll have that corrected.
You okay? We're good? All right. So members of the committee, we have one registered delegation for tonight's meeting. Lori, oh, did we vote?
We voted.
Oh, sorry, it just popped up again on my screen. Members of the committee, we have one registered delegation for tonight's meeting. Lori McIntyre, J.C. Brantford Nonprofit Homes Corporation. I have Mayam Abukar and Tim Welsh Consulting, Inc. Could you please come forward to speak to item 6.1.4, the Downtown Community Improvement Plan? Please note that you do have 10 minutes inclusive of questions from the members of the committee.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Lori McIntyre, and I'm the property manager for JC's Not-for-Profit Homes Corporation. We've been affordable housing providers for 35 years. Our portfolio consists of 83 single-family dwellings scattered all over city of Brantford. We're very excited to be expanding to help meet the critical housing needs in Brantford. Our new project is a 24-unit building that'll be designated for women and women-led families, and that will be located at 32 Bridge Street. This evening, we are requesting that you approve our top property tax increment-based grant application for 32 Bridge Street. The construction costs for this project have increased by over $1 million since this application was prepared. And we are desperately in need of your support for this application so that we can ensure to provide affordable units. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we do have a question from Mayor Davis for you.
Hi, Lori. Thanks for coming out tonight, and through you, Madam Chair. Lori, can you tell us how critical it was in your decision-making on this project to have available this property tax increment rebate program for especially the attainable housing that your organization is going to be providing?
I can say that in order to make the budget work to afford affordable units for our tenants, the budget fits where that exemption is necessary. I don't know if Tim can add to that at all.
Perhaps I can, Mr. Mayor, that the difference it makes is quite substantial. Property tax is the largest single item in an operating budget. And the difference that council hopefully will support this evening essentially means that rents can be reduced by between $130 and $140 each and every month over the 10-year period. And it is really important in terms of achieving that affordability overall in and of itself, but also important because Brantford JC's is collaborating with CMHC, Canada Morrison Housing Corporation. They have certain requirements for affordability levels as well. So this tax grant is essential to accessing that. So really the city's initiative is a key for leveraging other levels of government funding. So it's additionally helpful on that level.
Follow up. So does that mean you probably want to give 5 gold stars to the member council who brought that forward?
I'll let Lori answer that.
Of course.
Thanks, Lori, and good luck on it.
Very good. Thank you. I do have one last question from Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for coming this evening, and thanks for all you do in the community. It's important. How does the process work? People are going to hear now that there's a building coming there and it's affordable and that they could, and they're in a position where they could use that. How do they go about letting you know that they're in the market?
So JC Homes already has a policy procedure for receiving applications. So that would just continue on with this building as well.
Could you explain that?
Sure. So there's 2 streams of tenants that we have. We have subsidized tenants, rent geared income tenants, and we have market rent tenants. All of our rent geared income tenants come directly off of the housing list. And so we'll have 5 units of those 24 designated for that. And then the remaining will go on an application process that we actually field. And I already have a very long list. Right. And I'm hoping also that because we own single family dwellings, some of those assets are actually overhoused. And so I'm hoping to play a little bit of Tetris and be able to utilize a house for a family and then maybe move a single woman into one of these apartments.
Very good. Thank you.
And that is all we have for questions. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. And we're going to be reviewing this item shortly, okay? Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, members of the committee will now move on to items that are separated. Councillor Caputo, if you wouldn't mind, please reading the motion to place all separated items for consideration not previously voted on the floor, and be sure to state your seconder, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm moving this, and my seconder is my ward mate, John Sless, that all items for consideration consent items 6.1 and 6.2 separated for discussion purposes be approved.
All right, so if I don't see any objections, we're going to move item 6.1.4 to the beginning of the agenda for discussion, since we do have a delegation that's here tonight. So item 6.1.4, the Downtown Community Improvement Plan tax increment based on grant application. Do we have any discussion on this? Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's the item that we just had a delegation speak to. Am I correct about that?
Correct.
Yeah. And I just want to say one thing, a couple of things. One, JC Nonprofit Homes Corporation, for over several decades, they've been very active in our community and the area, providing nonprofit housing, really truly affordable housing for a number of people in our community, and really doing about it in a really quiet, thorough, really dedicated way. And they don't ask for any accolades, they just do it. And a board that's driven by a lot of really dedicated volunteers and some excellent staff, such as who we saw tonight, Lori. So I really commend this organization for the decades-long history they have in a number of different things in our community, and certainly nonprofit housing. The other thing I'd like to remark on is the program that they're applying for, which is this property tax increment rebate. It's designed to do two things. It's designed to increase construction in the downtown core area and some other Grayfield type areas in our community. But it was interesting when we developed the policy several years ago. We further refined it with some excellent staff input to increase the increment or the grant for projects that have the RGI, the rent geared income component, which there's 5 units, I believe, in this particular proposal that fall into that category. And that's really quite useful to us here at the city, because the people who be living in those units are the very same people who are on the 14 to 1,500 people on our waiting list. And this is an example of what the Mayor's Housing Task Force talked about, which is the city can't do it all. And so it's part of the proposal and initiative was to do things in partnership with other organizations like the JC. So it's really great to see that come to fruition, that we continue the partnership with JCs, and JCs once again stepping up. But also it's very satisfying, I think, for this council and staff who worked on that property tax increment rebate program. We're now beginning to see the impact of it. Proposals and developments that probably would not have been economically feasible without it. And in the longer term, we'll have housing, plus we'll also have a property that will be paying regular property taxes, albeit at some date in the future, but it'll still happen. So it's like a win-win, triple win, quadruple wins all over the place. Great. It's a great proposal, and I'm very happy to support it.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, we have Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be supporting this completely. I have an issue with the private sector building affordable housing, because as soon as the agreement is up, it goes straight up to market rent. Whereas with this organization, we know they'll continue to keep it at affordable rents, and it's not going to be something where the city's all of a sudden going to have to pick up the slack. So it's wonderful this organization is doing this, and if this grant helps them to do it, then I'm all for it. And hopefully they have a very successful project and continue to look for other opportunities as well. So good, keep up the good work.
Thank you. In keeping with the policy that we call upon councillors who are in the chambers first, I'll call on Councillor Sless next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It should be noted that the current assessed value on that property is $234,000. But when this comes to fruition and the building is up in the air, that assessed value goes to 2.7 million plus, which is a huge tax increase for the city. Yes, we're giving up part of that to make the project work, but in perpetuity, that property is worth a lot more money and it's being used as opposed to sitting there vacant. So I think it's you can't say enough about this. I wish there were more community groups doing what the JCs are doing because you're exemplary. You're doing a great job. So thank you.
And seeing no more speakers in the chambers, I'll call upon Councillor Carpenter. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought it would have been covered. I thought Councillor Sless got it, but just for the viewing public, though, the $200,000 that the assessment being paid on the property, that we don't forego that tax. We just forego the increase in taxes over a decreasing number of years. And as Councillor Sless said, we'll be receiving many times that amount in the future when the building is up and running and been in place for about 10 years. So just for the viewing public, we're not giving away any tax dollars that we currently exist. Just want to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. And seeing no further speakers, Madam Clerk, if we could call the vote, please.
I'm having technical difficulties.
It's just one of those nights. It's fine.
I think we're going to have to go to a hand vote. The system seems to have not been working for me. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and leave it raised until you hear your name called. Councillor Samwell, Councillor Hunt, Councillor Martin, Councillor Caputo, Mayor Davis, Councillors Van Tilborg, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Sless, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Carpenter, and Chair Sakoli. Thank you. The motion is carried.
Thank you so much for that. Moving forward, we'll move to item 6.1.1 and Councillor Van Tilburg, I believe you asked for this to be separated.
Yes, I did ask for it to be separated, particularly so that I could vote against it. I believe there'll be probably further speakers coming with a little more detail on the project. And I just don't, we have in the 5th Ward a significant number of buildings that have a heritage aspect to them. And the rules that bring it forward to the Heritage Committee so they can go and assess whether this building should be demolished or not demolished. It's a shame that people don't register their buildings so that we can preserve them, and that more efforts aren't put with property standards to enforce the quality of the buildings so that things like eaves troughs and things like that don't run down and affect the foundations. But if we keep this going, we're probably going to lose a significant amount of, while not designating a level of a mayor live there or whatever, we're losing some quality buildings. And we continue to do so. So hopefully this might be a time where people realize what the value of the Heritage Registry is and what it can do.
Thank you. Up next, I have Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Through you to staff, I have a number of questions about the building condition, if someone's prepared to answer those. The building appears to have been the subject of a fire at some point in recent history. Is that correct?
Yes. 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 Through the chair to the committee.
I'm hearing voices.
Through you, Chair, Patrick Booser, planner, long range planning. And through you to the councillor, yes. So Brantford Fire confirmed that a fire occurred in August of 2022 at the subject property.
Okay. Does the city of Brantford have any outstanding complaints with respect to building condition?
Dave Weidrich, manager of property standards and bylaw.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, there was an order that was placed back in August of 2019.
That was pre-fire?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what's outstanding, Mr. Weidrich?
There was about 2.5 pages. There was a lot of things that were outstanding. Inspection was done. We were contacted by, a lot of department was contacted that they were going for demolition. But they had tenants in there that they had to try to evict. We proceeded to an order within a month. Again, more correspondence with a lawyer that demolition was to take place. And finally, after going to the landlord tenant board, the tenants were evicted, and shortly thereafter was the fire, is my understanding.
Completely coincidental, as these things always are. Thank you. So this is, if I understand correctly, this is part of a development parcel consisting of this land and adjacent lands, which the owner has assembled and intends to develop. Do we have, thank you, gentlemen, do we have in our possession a plan for this property? Site plan or any sort of application for rezoning?
Through the chair to the councillor, there's no development application currently on file with the city.
Okay. Now, could you explain as well what the municipality's obligations are with respect to a demolition application on this property?
Through you, chair to the councillor, just for clarification, with respect to demolition control exclusively or through the notice of intention to demolish?
Have a go at the whole thing.
So through the chair to the councillor, with respect to notices of intention to demolish, the purpose of that tool under the Heritage Act is for a listed non-designated property. The intent of that tool is that council has further 60 days from the notice to determine if council would like the property to be designated under the Heritage Act. There's no decision point on the notice of intention to demolish itself.
Okay.
With respect to demolition control, that's a tool under the Planning Act that relates to the preservation of dwelling units and dwelling units exclusively.
And in this case, they're no longer considered dwelling units?
Through the chair, they're no longer considered usable dwelling units.
Right, because they've been permitted to sink to the depths of uninhabitability.
Through the chair, yes, through ongoing deterioration.
Okay. So the recommendation is to approve the demolition control app and to take it away from the Heritage Register, which is contrary to what the Heritage Committee would like to see, correct?
So through the chair, correct. That is to approve the demolition control application and to delist the property.
Okay. So we don't have an obligation to accede to the demolition application, have we?
Through the chair, council for the demolition control application can choose to approve or deny the application.
Okay. And we can also choose to not remove it from the register.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay. So there are two decisions this council could make tonight, both of which could be re-adjudicated at a later date when we're possessed of an application for rezoning, OP amendment, or site plan. We could, you know, when there's something before us, we could certainly revisit this if requested, right?
Through the chair, if the application is denied by council, then the applicant could reapply. Council could make a decision to deny pending, again, a development application.
Okay. And I've had a look at the building. I don't believe it's in any imminent danger of tumbling over into the street. Would that be accurate? Doesn't pose any sort of risk to anybody that's not trespassing?
Through the chair, we did speak with the owner of the property. He's planning on putting fencing around the property, more because The property has been listed as vacant now and it's been boarded up. However, people are getting inside and he's trying to stop people from getting inside. So he's going to put the fencing up and around.
Okay,
So we're hoping that that's going to keep it safe.
sure. Thank you very much for that, guys.
Thank you, Councillor McCreary. Up next, I have Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Patrick, just a quick question. So just for clarification purposes, the tenants have been gone since November of last year.
Through the chair, that is the understanding I have based on the information from the applicant.
And in the process, the owner has not upkept the building in the meantime.
Through the chair, that's my understanding.
And the owner looked into possible demolition prior to the fire occurring.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Next, I have Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to be clear on process. We can deny the application, but does that start a clock?
Through the chair, for clarification, a clock for which purpose?
A clock that we at some point, it's good for 60 days or 90 days, our denial, and then at that point, we're obligated to issue a demolition?
Through the chair, no. So when a notice of intention to demolish is given to a council or to a municipality, that's a 60-day notice to consider the matter, but there's no decision point. So once that 60-day period ends, there's no further action needed by the municipality on that notice. It just gives council more time to consider if it would like the property designated. But the demolition control portion, there is an approval or denial, and if denied, the applicant would have a recourse through the Ontario Land Tribunal if they chose to appeal. They could also potentially choose not to proceed with the demolition.
Okay, so it was always my understanding that regardless of what we did, at some point in time in the future, as a right of ownership, that person could demolish that building. Is my thinking flawed?
Through the chair, no, it's just that it's not an application under the Heritage Act to demolish.
Okay.
They would still have to initiate a permit to demolish under the building code in order for the demolition to occur.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clear as mud. So this is an applicant. First of all, what was the position of the Heritage Committee? Because they met last week. Did they not consider this?
Through the chair, they were not supportive.
Okay. And so this is an application for a demolition permit under the Heritage Act.
Through the chair, it's an application under our demolition control bylaw. That's under the Planning Act, and it preserves the residential units.
Okay.
But it's a notice, a formal notice of the intent to demolish, which is an obligation of the owner under the Heritage Act. So there are two different pieces of applicable law.
Well, let's do it this way. If this had not been listed, what would the procedure be?
Through the chair, it would simply be the demolition control application. That would still have gone to the Heritage Committee for review and comment under current procedures as they comment and advise council if a dwelling unit is older than 40 years, they may advise that the property has cultural heritage value.
Okay, and so that's, let's follow that process. So then let's say it would come back to us, again, not listed, and say Heritage Committee would recommend that we not approve it. In that scenario, do they not still get their demolition permit after 60 days?
Through the chair, no, as just as a different process. The 60 days only comes with the heritage component, and that's an obligation on the city, the 60 days. The application under demolition control can be approved or denied by council, and then the applicant could apply for the demolition permit after that if there was an approval.
All right. So why were we told when we were considering listing properties, not designating, listing, that what it would do is cause a 60 or 90-day delay in the demolition process so that the owner and council could consider moving to designate the property? Did I get that wrong?
No, that through the chair, that is the purpose of the listing process.
Nicole, can you
Sure. So through the chair to Mayor Davis, just to provide some clarification, that's absolutely correct. So as Patrick indicated, there are two aspects of applicable law here. What we're dealing with is the heritage component. The 60 days allows for enough reasonable time for council to consider moving to designation. That's the remedy in this type of situation, that if you have a listed property and there's a proposal for demolition of a listed property, the remedy is to allow for this council to consider moving that property from listed to designated. That would be the mechanism to protect this property from the demolition application under the Heritage Act. I think, based on the fire damage and the report that we've seen, the analysis that's been conducted by Patrick Verser, the heritage attributes, which have been identified as the components to which this property has been listed, have been damaged, unfortunately, as a result of the deterioration of this property. So the Heritage Committee did not move to recommend that this property move from listed to designated, nor did staff in this instance.
One last question. Under Bill 23, is it going to be off the list in 2 years anyways?
That's a reasonable assumption. I think so. As we understand through Bill 23, listed properties that are not moved to the designation are removed from the listing. This is a process by which I understand to, maybe cast a smaller net across municipal properties that the city has considered to be heritage attributes and actually move some of those property to full designation. However, there's still criteria that's not been released by the province. We don't fully understand those impacts, but we absolutely believe that that is the intention of the changes to the Heritage Act, that if you do not designate within 2 years, they come off the listing.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I suspect I've gone close to 4. So
You've exceeded your 4. Thank you. Moving on, and I see you, Councillor Carpenter, but we're going to stay in council chambers right now with Councillor Martin will be next. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do we know, is there anybody here who can speak to the extensiveness of the fire?
Through the chair, Brantford Fire is not in attendance to my knowledge.
Okay, you haven't seen the building?
Through the chair, I've not been inside the building or through a detailed inspection. We could reach out to Brantford Fire for further information for council.
That might be helpful, yeah. Recently, we added a bunch of properties to the register, and some of them were against the wishes of the property owners. And I went along with that because we were told that being on the list doesn't provide any hardship to the property owner. And now we see that somebody wants to use this list as a mechanism to delay the demolition. And if they come forward with a plan to redevelop this property, does the city not have to give them a demolition permit? Is there not some mechanism there where they can get the permit?
So through the chair, again, we engage different tools that are governed by different pieces of legislation or different sections of the legislation. So if it was just a permit to construct or demolish under the building code and there were no other pieces of applicable law in place, they could apply for demolition and then that process would proceed and eventually conclude. But in this case, they do have to receive approval of the demolition control application, which being non-routine goes before council. And then the notice of intention to designate, we have 60 days plus a little bit more, depending on how long it would take them to actually, go through their demolition process to determine if we want to designate it. That's, again, those other tools that are sort of engaged at this point.
Okay. And I've said many times, I will not designate a property against the wishes of the owner, except for very extenuating circumstances. I think we did that once. And we told people that there's no problem being on the register. It doesn't cause you any problems. So I'll be voting in favor of the demolition. It sounds like this building's in pretty rough shape. The heritage attributes are destroyed in the either through the fire or through neglect. And as we've seen, when properties get redeveloped, the property assessment value goes up and we get more property taxes. So I'll be voting in favor of this demolition permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Up next, I have Councillor Hunt.
So through the chair to Mr. Wiedrich, you mentioned that we had an outstanding property standards violation rather lengthily. So some of my questions have been answered, but is that still in force? And in which case there's a time limit on that document, I believe.
Through Madam Chair. Again, this was before my time. So I've just picked up this file within the last month, but we can do three things. We can register on title. So if they do try to sell the property, but again, it's all based on the demolition request. We can fix the property. From the list I saw, hundreds of thousands of dollars for the city to embark on that. And the last is lay a charge that they didn't actually obey our order and go before a court. And the fine can be all the way 50,000 for private to 100,000 for a corporation. So we haven't, the bylaw department has not gone that far yet.
So again, through the chair, it's safe to say that based on the property standards requirements that they have, and that the fact that they want, the owner wants to demolish the property, that this property isn't going to be remediated in any way, shape, or form. It's going to be sitting in its derelict condition if we don't agree to demolish it.
Through Madam Chair, that's correct. They have to make it safe, and they've made it safe at this point with no one living there and with it being boarded up and then with the fencing going around it. So that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no more first-time speakers in the chamber, I'm going to go to Councillor Carpenter, tuning in virtually.
Thank you, Councillor Segoli. So to be clear, the decision here is if we deny this application, it's because we're going to consider designated. Is that clear? The staff person?
Someone. Oh.
Yeah. Through you, Madam Chair, someone would need to move an amendment for that direction. And then that could be the consideration before this committee of the whole.
So, and if we were to just deny it without giving direction, what would be the ramifications of that?
Through the chair, I might need to defer to the clerk on just procedurally, if the recommendation on the floor is not approved, a denial for other reasons is not approved, what the result would be procedurally.
Through the chair. So at this time, the motion that's on the floor is that it be removed from the Heritage Register and then the application for demolition be approved. By virtue of failing clauses B and C does not B does not dictate to maintain it on the list, whereas C, if you vote against the be approved, then essentially it fails and it's not approved. So it's a bit tricky, but we could procedurally work our way through it.
Yeah, so A is to receive the report. B, we could approve B to remove it from the registry. And then we could deny the demolition control application separately. That's what.
Correct.
Those are options as well. Okay. All right. And just the staff, the building's been boarded up. So how long has it been boarded up?
Through Madam Chair, I believe right after the fire, it was boarded up. And then in November 4th, we did a blitz of vacant properties, and we found that some of the boards were loose and they reboarded it up again.
Okay. So, and they have to register that every year and pay a fee, do they not?
Through Madam Chair, correct. Every year they have to show they have insurance, and they pay a permit fee to keep it vacant.
On the vacant registry. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Moving to Councillor McCreary, please.
Madam Chair, I plan to do something novel. Is there any speaker after me in the queue?
I have a few speakers after you.
Maybe you could come back to me.
I'll cycle back to you. Councillor Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Patrick, just one quick thing. When this property was listed or going to be listed, did the owner dispute the heritage listing?
Through the chair, the owner did not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sless, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not quite clear. If we turn this demolition down, what happens? So the building sits there derelict, boarded up for how long? In perpetuity?
Through Madam Chair to the counselor. So if the council moves to deny the demolition application and does not move to designate the property, the applicant would have the ability to appeal that decision. Also, if the council were to move to deny the application and through the listing process move to designation, the applicant could also appeal the designation based on what I believe would be the issues around the features of the property being damaged as a result of the conditions of the property, unfortunately.
Okay, I think we heard the violations, the property standards order against it would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And looking at the pictures, I would agree. You can stand and look outside up through the roof. There's part of the roof is gone from the fire. So I think it's a nice looking building, to be quite candid with you, but it's not in very good shape. And I would really question why we would try and bail something out that is obviously for whatever reason failing bad. And I realize it's probably from neglect, but however it got there, it's there. And to me, it really serves no purpose to try and halt something that is neat, in my opinion, should come down and say, no, you can't take it down because there's things about it that we like. So I think I'm probably in Mr. or Councillor Martin's camp here. I think it's only reasonable to assume that it should come down, and I'll be supporting the demolition. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, I have Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Through you to staff. Is it not true that property standards can order a building to be demolished if it's been badly damaged by fire?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, we can. Very rare that that's been done.
I believe there's one in Eagle Place recently that the wall fell and we had to go in and do a demolition and charge the homeowner.
Through the chair, Heidi DeVries, General Manager, People, Legislative Services and Planning. The councillor's recollection is correct, and that was under the Building Code Act.
Thank you. This also reminds me of a situation we had in Ward 3 with an old church that was slated to be redeveloped into a nursing home. And unfortunately, vagrants kept pulling the boarding off the windows and getting inside. And it created a very dangerous situation where drugs were being trafficked and all kinds of things going on there, and fires inside the building so they could keep warm, which had the potential for a very serious fire in that neighborhood. And we did everything we could to encourage the developer to tear the building down sooner rather than later. And I think that applies for this one as well. The longer this building stands, the more potential there is for someone to get inside and possibly even start a bad fire that kills themselves and others. So I think for the safety of the community, as well as in the interest of redevelopment, we need to move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor McCreary now.
Madam Chair, thank you.
Pause. Someone wants to speak before you. Are you okay with that? Yeah.
Am I?
Mayor Dave. I was gonna say, Mayor
Sorry,
Dave
we're not
has
next
asked
in the
to
queue.
speak. Do you want to go
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'll
right
go.
now, or do
Sure.
you want to
Yeah.
pause
Yeah.
for someone?
I wonder
else?
if, thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I wonder if the clerk could explain the consequence and significance of council laying this on the table.
Through the chair, laying this on the table, it can be taken up at a future session of Committee of the Whole, Planning and Administration. If the intention is to make a decision in advance of City Council, then you would want to defer the item or refer back to staff for negotiation purposes. But laying it on the table, you could essentially do that to bring it back to a future meeting. It's a version of deferral.
Laying on the table is an indefinite deferral until it's resurrected.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. So Madam Chair, I'm going to move that we lay this on the table. I believe I have a seconder in Councillor Van Tilburg, and I'll speak briefly to the laying on the table. It's a Robert's Rules of Order rule. It's not I don't think it's embedded in our rules and procedures, but it is appropriate in the circumstance. So what it does is it's fair to all parties. It's fair to the owner of the property because at the point where they make application or they submit a site plan, we can bring this back on the table, approve it, and they'll be able to proceed post haste. The project has no site plan, has no application before us. The consequence of demolishing the building now could very well be that the project may, the assembly may fall apart. There may be nothing that arises, and we've lost a piece of Brantford's heritage that could have been restored by a new owner. We've seen a resurgence in interest in terms of renovating old homes in Brantford. There was a home that we were going to tear down on Dufferin Avenue quite some time ago that we logically changed our minds on that, and a builder has restored that completely, and it's a showpiece. And it could be the same with this. Staff indicate that we've lost some of the heritage attributes, but we have the brick, we have most of the trim, we have everything in place, and whatever's gone can certainly be replicated and added to, as we've seen with respect to buildings like Wynarden, for instance, which was completely rebuilt over the course of 10 or 20 years by the current owner. So I'm going to suggest that we follow this course of action tonight. It doesn't defeat anything before us. It's not going to lead to an Ontario Land Tribunal action. It's fair to the Heritage Committee, who would like to see this building maintained. It's fair to the owner, who can at any point in time give us an application, give us a site plan that would spur the bringing this back to the table, and council could then do as it chooses at that time. So I would hope that everybody could support this tonight. We've heard that it doesn't pose a safety risk to anybody at present. The owners plan to fence it in. And I think this is a reasonable compromise to the situation before us. And I would hope that this might be acceptable.
I'm going to refer right now to Alan, who's staff, who's probably going to talk about the Ontario Land Tribunal, or hopefully he will. If I'm reading your mind, maybe not.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to the committee. I think there is some implication to a delay here, because after this 60-day period, the applicant still can appeal the lack of decision on the demolition permit to the Land Tribunal. And after 60 days, then council will lose its window of opportunity to issue a notice of intent to designate, which is your one other option for delaying the demolition. Now, were council to issue that notice, then that could also be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Okay. Thank you for that. Up next, I have Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, I just would like the clerk to verify to me where and what clause in our procedural bylaw laying on the table is. I'm not familiar with it. I heard it was in Robert's Rules of Order, but we don't go by Robert's Rules of Order. We go by our procedural bylaw. So could you quote to me the clause in the procedural bylaw where this is part of our process?
Yep, through the chair, if you can just give me a quick moment. So under Section 15.2.1, unless council authorizes the application of alternative procedures, this chapter shall apply to proceedings of the municipal council of the city of Brantford, the committees created or continued under this chapter, and with necessary modifications to all boards and advisory committees created under Chapter 26 of the municipal code, and to any task forces created by council. Proceedings not specifically governed by this chapter, so in situations such as this, where we do not have a response or do not have it in our procedural bylaw, shall be interpreted in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Seeing no further, jumping in, I have Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Speaking to the laying on the table specifically, correct?
Okay. I would like to be able to support this, but I looked at the pictures that Cahoon did Cahoon Engineering did a study of the building. They went in and went through everything. And if one looks at those pictures, you would really have to wonder how you would have to be one heck of a builder to repair this thing. you've got nothing to nail to. I don't really know how one would go about trying to rehabilitate this building and say it's a heritage building when it was completed, because there's virtually nothing left to work with. You can sit in the bathroom and watch the birds fly over top of the house. It's that bad a shape. Neglect was a big part of it, but so was the fire. The fire did a lot of damage, and in some rooms, the ceiling from the room above it is laying on the floor in the room below. So that's the type of building we're looking at. It's not something that needs some cosmetic work and could maybe you could live in it again. This would need a total and complete rebuild in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So as much as I'm sympathetic to the folks that are sympathetic to these kind of situations, I don't see it as being practical. So unfortunately, I won't be able to support this, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One of the reasons given for laying this on the table is to allow the Heritage Committee a chance to list this, but did they not vote to not list this property?
Sorry, through the chair for clarification, not list or not designate?
Designate, sorry.
Through the chair, the committee did not make the comment that the property should be designated. It did not make that comment.
So the Heritage Committee has no intention of designating this property?
Through the chair, the comments were not supportive of the demolition for various reasons, but they did not make the comment to designate.
Oh, they didn't speak to it one way or the other. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, I'll take a second and just give some remarks on this. And it's unfortunate what's happened with this property. However, when this designation list came about, we spoke so highly of the fact that there was going to be absolutely no roadblocks before anyone who was on this list. And now here we are 45 minutes into a conversation about whether or not we should allow a decrepit house to be demolished. So on that merit alone, I will be voting against the laying this on the table indefinitely. I do think we need to move forward with it. Any historical features or historical relevance have been destroyed. They haven't been maintained. They're not even present on the property anymore for us to even consider designating this. So for that reason alone, I will be voting against this laying on the table. And seeing no one else looking to speak, jump in there, Mayor Davis, with the last speaker.
So I wanted to ask a question about the property standards issue. And so what is the obligation of an owner when the property's vacant and they boarded it up to make it safe, no one can enter it? So what obligations do they have under the property standards bylaw when the property or the buildings reach that point?
Through you, Madam Chair. They have made it safe, which meets the minimum standards. However, for us to go inside, we need their permission or judicial authority to go in. So we can examine the outside of the house once everyone's vacated, but we can't go inside. Right. And that caused the issue here.
But if they wanted to have the property occupied, they certainly would have to do a lot of work to bring it up into compliance with the property standards bylaw.
Madam Chair, that's correct.
Right. Yeah, I some of the comments been made about this listing process. Yes, we were told, and I remember very clearly that, very little impact upon the owners. What it will do is give us a chance to consider having a property designated, give us some extra time. And beyond that, we're telling owners, there is really no other impact. While we're seeing the reality, there is an impact. And in some ways, it looks like it's designation by stealth. And much of the same problem someone has in terms of dealing with a designated property seems now to happen when you have a property that's been listed. Plus, the listing process, pretty clear from Bill 23 that if you don't designate a property that's on the list within 2 years, they come off the list almost automatically. And yes, we don't know exactly what the wording is going to be, but the intent's pretty clear from Bill 23. And so we've also saw last week what listing also does to adjoining property owners. Like if there's a development application by someone who owns a property that's adjacent to a listed property and their property may have no historical merit to it. Well, they have to actually have a heritage impact study done before they can proceed with their development application. So there's a lot more to this listing process than what we were telling owners that would be involved. And so for that reason, I agree with the comments that have been made. I don't think we should be putting this on the table. Putting it on the table is obviously just not going to work beyond 60 days. So, and I agree that in this scenario, for all the reasons that indicated by councillors Sless and Martin, it just doesn't make any sense. And to have this property sit there boarded up with temptation by certain people to enter the building, to use it to squat in, it creates a safety hazard. And for a building that doesn't look to me like anyone's going to move to designate it. So, I mean, that's unfortunate because maybe if someone had an interest, you could do something with the property. But that's the key to designation. You need an owner that's willing, invested, and wants to do it. And to make people do something, to make them designate a property usually doesn't work.
Thank you. And now we have a motion to, we have a few more people. We have Councillor Samwell first.
So I just wanted to say that I will be supporting putting it on the table because I think that if we're going to allow things to become disrepair or not have to follow the property standards as a way of just not taking care of the property and letting a heritage properties or what could be a potential heritage property, something as significant as a mayor's home, it sets a poor standard to just allow things like that to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Samwell. We have Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. We can only hope that 100 years from now, we won't be having a future council debate the demolition of a certain home on Glenwood Drive, because I think that would be equally a shame as the home of this former mayor that we're talking about tonight.
Well, then there'd be 10 homes.
And thank you for allowing me a little levity, Madam Chair, in a debate, which is fraught with emotion, certainly on both sides. I'm not possessed of the clairvoyance that some folks have. I can't begin to understand what the owner may do when faced with having this laid on the table. My guess is probably nothing until they move to the point where they file an application or a site plan. And I think that's probably a reasonable assumption that we can make. Lots of talk about the evils of listing. Well, it's before us tonight. Council can make the decision to delist it. So where's the harm? There's no harm at all. There's no impediment to the owner. I don't see the trucks lined up to pour concrete on this site tomorrow morning. I don't see any forms. I don't see any excavators. They're a long way away from building, and the only thing they're close to is demolition. And I hope that we can decide to put that off tonight. We're not designating by stealth. There's nothing stealthy about this. We do everything in the clarity of daylight, except for here in the council chamber when we sit in the evening. And even then we have lights and folks can see what we do. So there's nothing stealthy about this. I don't know what the budget's going to be to restore this house. I don't think anybody in here does. Certainly it'd be a lot of money. And certainly what comes out the other end would be a very magnificent building that perhaps, and as I said, perhaps there will be a change in ownership on this building. Perhaps the project falls apart. Lay it on the table tonight. We give this building a chance to live another day, another week, another month, another year, and perhaps it'll be renovated someday. Heritage Committee chose not to designate because that starts a fight and this council would not support it. And I suspect that's probably why that's not before us tonight. Plus they weren't asked. They were only asked to comment on what's before us. So no harm can come from laying this on the table. Thank you, Councillor Carpenter, for asking the question about how we landed on this rule. And it's clear that it's part of our rules and procedures, even though it's not specified and it's merely referenced by Robert's rules. So please support this tonight. Any one of you can bring this back next week or the week after or the month after in 2023. It's fresh there for the taking. And if the owner doesn't take objection to it, we can have another discussion another day. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll try to keep our remarks towards the topic at hand, which is laying this on the table, please. Councillor Martin. Why do I have you on my list then? All right, Councillor Carpenter then.
Just want to be clear, it's the whole motion, A, B, and C that are on the table, being laid on the table. Is that not correct?
That is correct, Councillor Carpenter.
Okay, so if we were laying, for example, we're receiving the report, we could receive the report, we could then remove the from the Heritage Registry, and then we could deal with C separately or lay that on the table. There's lots of options. Okay, thank you.
There. Seeing no further speakers, let's call the vote on the laying on the table.
The motion to lay on the table is carried 6-5. Those in favor, Councillor Sullivan, Caputo, McCreary, Hunt, Samuel, Van Tilburg. Those opposed, Carpenter, Martin, Sless, Sicoli, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, so that is on the table. Moving forward, we're going to pull out 6.1.2, and this is because of Councillor Van Tilburg's conflict. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Martin, please.
Yeah, the report says that the bulk of this refund will be from development charges. I thought the intent was to use the incremental tax increase to do this kind of refund. When did we move to include development charges in this option?
Good evening, committee members. Joshua Scram, intermediate long range planner. Through the chair, in regards to the way that this application is structured and the Brownfield CIP program, the applicants always have the opportunity to apply to both the DC reduction program and the BIFTIP program. In a lot of instances, and I think the last time an application was brought forward to the committee would have been in 2018. So the way that applications kind of advance, obviously applicants are going to reach development charges first. So they go through the development charges, eligible expenses underneath the development charges, which are often for the Brownfields program, kind of shovel in ground costs. They're allowed to reduce those costs through that program. And then the remaining amount is often covered through the BIFTIP program. So that's how the programs have always kind of been structured since the introduction of the CIP in 2003 and the subsequent amendment in 2005.
Okay, and is this structured such that the development charges are paid and then refunded the same way as the tax program?
So in terms of the program, the developer needs to go through, or the applicant, sorry, needs to go through the remediation program, paying those fees. And then what city staff do with our third party team is we review eligible costs under the DC program. And then they would then at the building permit stage have their DCs reduced.
By what's eligible?
By the eligible cost.
Okay,
correct.
Thank
you.
And seeing no other speakers, I will ask if Bill 23 has any implications on how we handle this.
So through the chair, I think that's a really good question. I think when we're talking about incentives and Brownfield incentives specifically, the playing field, when we talk about the Brownfield CIP, we have underutilized sites. And when we're talking about DCs and them being reduced and some of the new review of Bill 23, I think the playing field is still the same, whether, those apply to a greenfield or they apply to an infill development or an underutilized site such as a Brownfield. So I think in terms of creating those opportunities to remediate underutilized sites, these programs are still of significant value, but I think the plan would be as those programs are reviewed, hopefully in the new year, and we bring something forward to this committee and council to look at that and see those impacts and really understand what it looks like with some of these new bill changes and really wrap our head around it with this group.
Very good. I don't envy you having to navigate that. Alan, did you?
Thank you, through you to the committee. Just to build on what Josh was saying, we have in our work plan for next year to do a comprehensive review of the Brownfield site community improvement plan and all of its component incentive programs. So that includes the Brownfield's DC reduction as well as the BIF tip program. So it's actually really timely that we would be doing that with a view to the changes to DC's overall resulting from Bill 23.
Great. Thank you for your insights. Seeing no further speakers, clerk will call the vote.
Item 6.1.2, BIF tip application 352-356 West Street is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sakoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, McCurry, Hunt, Carpenter, and Samwell, noting Councillor Van Tilburg's conflict of interest.
Great, thank you. Up next, item 6.2.1, and Councillor Carpenter, you asked for this to be separated.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're doing a fine job tonight. Thanks. I want to thank staff for this report. It's one of my favorite reports, as you know. I want to bring your attention to page 5 of the report, 8.3, future road dedication. And I want to thank staff for not forgetting that we want to recognize Captain Leary and Sergeant Rudd, who made the supreme sacrifice. And we talk about in the report about rescheduling an actual dedication of Veterans Memorial Parkway. And I believe it was Councillor Sless who brought that resolution forward to name Veterans Memorial Parkway, then called the BSAR, Veterans Memorial Parkway. So I would hope that we could coincide that May 24th and the same time as the street naming, if we could, for Sergeant Rudd and Captain O'Leary as well. And I'd like to certainly, I think it should be, my council colleagues may, hopefully wouldn't disagree with me, that we certainly highlight the work of Councillor Sless for bringing the Veterans Memorial Parkway forward at the same time. And I think this would be a great celebratory event, and somber, but celebratory in our community where we're recognizing our veterans and specifically these two veterans along with Veterans Memorial Parkway. So thank you to staff for what you've done here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
CAO Hutchings, I believe you have something to add to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Coley. I know Maria Vasaki is online as well, but we did plan to do something May 24, 2020, but this thing happened called COVID and it derailed it for the last few years. Maria is planning to do something this May 2023 and renewing that commitment. So that's a motion that was made by Councillor Carpenter a number of years ago.
Thank you so much for adding to that. Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. Quite often, hard work by members of this council goes unrecognized, and I'd just like to point out Councillor Carpenter's tenacity on this file and his attention to it. And I know he's pulled a rabbit out of a hat a number of times when it slipped off our radar, and I think the night shouldn't go without his recognition for looking after this aspect of our interest. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, Madam Clerk, we'll call the vote.
Item 6.2.1, annual update on street naming 2022 carries unanimously on recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sakoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, McCreary, Hunt, Carpenter, Samwell, Van Tilburg.
Okay, we'll now move on to the resolution part of our agenda. Item 7.1 is our first resolution, and Councillor McCreary, you have the floor.
Chair, thank you. The mover is me. The seconder is my ward mate, Councillor Martin. And the resolution reads as follows: whereas sections 8, 9, and 10 of the Municipal Act authorizes the corporation to pass bylaws necessary or desirable for municipal purposes, and in particular, paragraphs 5 through 8 authorize bylaws respecting the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the municipality, the health, safety, and well-being of persons, and the protection of persons and property. And whereas Section 129 of the Act provides municipalities with the authority to regulate outdoor illumination, and whereas Section 613 of the zoning bylaw regulates flood lighting, and whereas lighting technology has advanced in recent years to provide more options for brightness, energy efficiency, and price, and whereas in the opinion of the council of the city of Brantford, certain kinds of lights or residual lighting that are or could become a nuisance. Now, therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to review comparative municipal lighting regulations and best practices and invite comments from residents and businesses, and B, that staff report back to city council with potential bylaw amendments to update regulations to outdoor illumination February of next year. And I would hope that everybody would support this tonight and allow staff to go ahead and do this work. This has arisen because we've had a number of complaints in our ward about the impacts that outdoor illumination have had on residential neighbors. There's a couple of cases, one that I can think of in particular, where the neighbor said he could pretty much read a newspaper at night with the light coming through his window from an adjacent commercial property. And to the best of our ability, we dealt with it, but we don't have the tools necessarily to deal with that specific circumstance. And interestingly enough, I had a call this week from a neighbor who said that they like the illumination from their commercial neighbor because it keeps the vagrants out of the dumpster. So, you know, there are opportunities for us to examine our bylaw and to ensure that it captures the nuisance aspect, but doesn't deter the aspect where neighbors want to monitor the safety of their environment by use of lights. So hopefully everybody can support this tonight. We'll have the report come back in February, have some people come in and tell us what they think of it, and maybe move towards a better way of regulating outdoor illumination. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Oh, this is very timely. I think what I really like about this resolution is that it's asking the public for their input, because those lights can be really effective and really great, and they can also be very intrusive on neighbors. And so it's what I find amazing is the brightness that can come from these new lights. It is daylight at 3 a.m. in the morning on people's yards. And if that goes into your backyard or into your home, that can be pretty disturbing. So I really hope that we can get the word out to all the community. I hope we do that through our Let's Talk Brantford. Is that done naturally, that we go through Let's Talk Brantford in order to get those comments from the public?
Good evening. Maria Vasaki, Director of Communications and Community Engagement. Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilburg, we can certainly use the Let's Talk Brantford platform for this purpose. I think it would lend itself very well. If council wishes, we could also look at other means of collecting feedback from the public, including a public meeting and also a dedicated email address. But yes, I do think Let's Talk Brantford would be an appropriate forum for this type of feedback request.
So we wouldn't have to add this to the resolution. It would be done.
Yes, it's understood.
It's understood. That's wonderful, because I really want to get the word out there, and I want to hear, everybody's aspects of those that are using it and those that are being bothered by it, because, they don't sell if people don't want them. And then there's the people that don't want them.
Great, thank you. And seeing no further speakers, we'll call for the vote.
Item 7.1, outdoor illumination, carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sakoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Celeste Martin, McCurry, Hunt, Carpenter, Samwell, and Van Tilburg.
Perfect. And up next, we have Mayor Davis, if you wouldn't mind reading your motion and stating your seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure who wants to second it. Councillor Martin. So the title of this is Planning Committee Stipend. Whereas the Council of the Corporation approved the creation of a planning committee pilot project to expedite the number of planning-related applications heard in a monthly meeting cycle. And whereas the number of applications is expected to increase, and whereas the planning committee meetings are held during regular business hours commencing at 9 a.m. and continuing until 4 p.m. once a month on Thursdays. And whereas many members of the planning committee must take time off from their day jobs in order to attend these meetings. And whereas bylaw 81, 2014 being a bylaw to establish honoraria to be paid to the mayor and members of council does not permit additional stipends to be paid to members of council sitting on an advisory committee or board. Now therefore be it resolved, A, that a stipend paid directly to the members of the planning committee, excluding the mayor, in the amount of $250 per meeting attended, be approved as an unavoidable increase in the city 2013 operating budget. And B, that the necessary bylaw to amend the honoraria bylaw be presented to city council for adoption. And may I speak to this?
Please do.
All right. So we have a system of part-time counselors. And we have over many years tried to facilitate that, generally where we have the important essential meetings like committee of the whole, council, taking place in the evening so that people can maintain a full-time job but still be a part-time counselor. And where we have had committees that we need mandatory attendance by at least half of the ward representatives and occurring during the day, we followed a policy of trying to divide them equally between each of the two ward councilors so that the load is carried evenly. And of course, the example of that is finance and social services, absolutely essential committees of this corporation that meet during the day. And of course, we do that. We require that there be one member from each ward. And of course, if you're going to be on the social services committee, which meets Wednesdays once a month at 9, then you don't do finance committee, your ward mate does that. So then we have this new creation, the planning committee. And typically for those viewers at home, this would be planning applications, the statutory hearing where you hear the applicant come and citizens. And normally in the past, we would do that one Tuesday evening per month. And typically we'd normally have 1 or 2 per month. And we could easily, in the past, have accommodated those within that 6 to 10 or 11 period time slot. Because the city's growing, and because there are many more applications now in the order of 3 to 6 a month, it was just impossible to continue doing that on Tuesday evenings unless we did it over 2 or 3 Tuesday evenings. So this pilot project is to have those statutory hearings during the day, one day per month. And so far we've had 2, and they're pretty full days. They start at 9, they've each gone into the afternoon, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And there's a lot of preparation as well, because you have to do a lot of reading of materials if you're carrying out your duties. So it struck me that with the planning committee, we were taking part-time counselors and expecting of them what you would expect of full-time counselors, and for at least a day or 2 a month. And that just didn't seem fair to me. And with a load being borne unequally by the 2 ward councilors. So I thought it would make sense as an exception to not paying a stipend to do that. It wouldn't apply to me because I'm getting paid anyways to be here because I'm considered full-time, not part-time. And so the dollar amount, typically, I'm quite familiar with provincial statutory appeal tribunals. Usually the province pays $500 per day. And so I just picked the number of being half that. It could be anything. It's whatever you want it to be if you feel that a stipend is appropriate, so long as we're continuing with this pilot project. So I'm just trying to do what's fair and recognizing that because of this new system, the load comes down more on one of the 2 ward councilors than on the other. And not being critical of the one that doesn't attend the planning committee, because many times they just can't because they work full time. So interested to see how councilors will vote on this.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. With 15 seconds to spare, I have Councillor Martin coming up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was happy to second this. I don't sit on the planning committee. My ward mate does. That's an agreement we came to when we're divvying up the various committees that require someone from each ward. And I was grateful for him to taking it, and I understand that it is a serious commitment. I did attend part of the last one because he was unable to for medical reasons, but I was unable to attend in the morning because I had a conflicting meeting as well. But I attended part of it, and they can be fairly long and drawn out. And I think the mayor's motion makes sense, and I support it fully. Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no further, Councillor McCurry.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. And I appreciate the comments of my ward mate, and I also appreciate him for filling in for me last week. I must say this does give me some not small degree of discomfort to be adjudicating a pay increase for myself. When we've done this in past, there's been a citizens committee convened, and we do that every council and look at that. But the mayor's resolution has merit. I think back to a time when former Mayor Bob Taylor was speaking to what at the time was a 73% pay hike for councillors. And Bob said, and I'll always remember this because the expositor had the 73% pay hike in 2000 font on the front page. And during the debate, Bob said, if you believe the job has merit, if you believe the job has value, you must vote to support this. And I do believe that the planning committee probably is the right direction for us, given the volume of work that we have. And I do believe there's value to it, but it does not diminish my discomfort in supporting this tonight. And I suspect that's the case for most of us that are sitting on that committee. But I believe I'd probably be hypocritical not to support it because there is a volume of work, and the mayor's quite correct that there probably should be some common sense. And I look forward to handing it off to my ward mate next year, because he was most kind when he said we came to an agreement. I believe it was the toss of a coin, which I lost.
Very good. And seeing no other speakers, we will call the vote. Oh, Councillor Carpenter. Sliding in at the last minute.
Thank you. I too am a little uncomfortable with this. Actually, I'm a lot uncomfortable with this. I'm uncomfortable because, we also have members of council that sit on the police services board, and that's a fair bit of work. We used to have members of council sit on Jones Aid. That was a ton of work. We also have members of council sit on the GRCA, and that's also a fair bit of work. And there's a stipend paid to that, and there's a stipend paid to the police services board. And I'm just, wondering where this leads. Does this lead us down that road that stipends are going to be paid for these other committees as well? And then how you're selected for what committee will depend on the stipend or the workload. I'm not sure. So I'm very uncomfortable with this. Thank you.
Mayor Davis.
Yeah, in responding to the two comments, I understand your discomfort. I'm kind of uncomfortable bringing it, but I think the distinction is this, that the Police Services Board, the GRCA, the health unit, those are committees that they aren't our committees. They're committees that either because of statute or custom or procedure, we appoint one or two council members to sit on them. And so it's not like it's a mandatory city committee. And whereas this planning committee, it's our committee, it's an essential committee that the city must operate and maintain because of our obligations under the Planning Act. And it requires attendance of 5 councillors plus the mayor. So it's kind of different than these other committees where you're almost like volunteering because maybe you've got an interest, say the health unit, and you've got the time. The planning committee has a different aspect to it, more like the social services, more like the finance, where it's an integral committee of the city and the city corporation, and where you do need half of the council members to be members. So I think that's the difference. I don't see this being a template or precedent to being extended to other committees. I think we can distinguish it. Thank you.
Now I see no further speakers. We will call the vote.
Item 7.2, Planning Committee stipend carried on recorded vote of 7-4. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, McCurry. Those opposed, Councillors Hunt, Carpenter, Samwell, and Van Tilburg.
Thank you. Okay, moving forward, item 7.3, 2022 municipal election. Councillor Carpenter, if you could read your resolution and mention your seconder, please.
My seconder is my ward mate, Councillor Hunt, and I apologize for the preamble with all the whereases. Whereas Section 11, Paragraph 1 of the Municipal Act provides the duties of the clerk of a local municipality is responsible for conducting elections within that municipality. And whereas the city clerk's department, in consultation with the communications department, designed and implemented a comprehensive election media plan for the 2022 municipal election, featuring newspaper ads, radio ads, social media ads, digital community screens, digital billboards, social media posts, Google ads, flyers, digital posters, and bus shelter posters. And whereas the city of Brantford partnered with Wilfrid Laurier and Conestoga College student unions to develop a communications plan aimed to promote awareness amongst the student body regarding the 2022 municipal elections. And whereas the voters list is compiled and maintained by the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, MPAC, and whereas electors were able to submit changes to MPAC regarding information on the voters list through voterlookup.ca year round, and whereas staff executed a 2-month communications campaign utilizing social media, city's website, election staff, email signatures, etc., to promote voter lookup to allow City of Brantford electors to update their elector information manually to the preliminary list of electors without having to complete an in-person application. And whereas for the first time ever, the City of Brantford collaborated with the Brantford Public Library to educate and train 40+ library staff on how to assist members of the public who attended the library to update their elector information on voterlookup.ca, as well as educate members of the public voting dates and times, including online voting. Whereas election staff completed data management over 1,200 electors through VoterView, that's a voter list software, to remove duplicate electors and invalid mailing addresses. And whereas election staff worked with the city's long-term care homes and retirement homes in aiding their residents to get added to the voters list. And whereas in 2019, City Council supported resolutions of the town of Kearney, municipality of Northern Bruce Peninsula, and the city of Hamilton to reestablish the multi-stakeholder working group to explore and identify ways to create and maintain the voters list for the municipal elections. And whereas on September 17, 2020, the provincial government introduced a bill which proposes to create a single register of voters for municipal and provincial elections, which would take place in 2024 ahead of the 2026 municipal elections. Whereas the city mailed out via Canada Post over 74,000 voter information letters to city residents, and whereas voter information letters contained elector ID and elector PIN information for online voting. And whereas in order to vote online, electors had to enter their date of birth as added verification. And whereas logic and accuracy testing was done in accordance with the city's procedure on all vote tabulating machines, memory cards, ballots, and online voting system software. And whereas reports containing multiple voters voting at the same IP address were captured 3 times a day to monitor online voting security. Whereas online voting ran from October 3rd, 10 a.m. to October 24th, 8 p.m., making this the longest online voting period the city has ran to date to allow sufficient time and enhance accessibility for Brantford electors. Whereas advanced polls were open from Wednesday, October 12th to Saturday, October 15th at 2 locations within the city of Brantford Civic Center, Wayne Gretzky Sports Center, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. to offer electors the option of voting in person prior to election day. And whereas the city's operated 25 polling stations throughout the city of Brantford on election day, October 24th, 2022, allowing residents the option to vote anywhere in your ward with an accessible super poll at City Hall. And whereas municipal election staff attended 11 roaming locations throughout the city of Brantford on election day to ensure residents of long-term care homes, institutions, and retirement homes that met the legislative requirement of the Municipal Elections Act had the opportunity to vote. And whereas a large amount of municipal Southern Ontario experienced a decrease in voter turnout for the 2022 municipal elections. Therefore, be resolved, City of Brantford Communications and Community Engagement staff be directed to conduct a public consultation meeting to hear from members of the public on how to improve election process and increase voter turnout, and that 2022 candidates for the 2022 municipal election be invited to attend public consultation. Now, the preamble is so long because I don't want anybody to think that anything went wrong, that staff did anything that wasn't untoward. They did everything they possibly could to increase voter turnout, and lo and behold, we didn't get an increase in voter turnout. And it does concern me that we're getting less and less people interested in voters turning out for the election. It's very important to me as a municipal councillor that we have a lot of people involved in coming out to vote for elections. I think they're very important. I wouldn't be supporting the veterans the way I do if I didn't think democracy is so important and that voter turnout was so important. So this is only here as a way to try and find out, is there ways that we could increase our voter turnout? I don't know whether it means we're competing with other municipalities and say who can get the best turnout in each municipality. I don't know what the options are. I have no idea what the ideas are. I just want to put it out there, find out from the public if anybody else has any ideas and any way we can increase voter turnout, because I think the last voter turnout was very disappointing indeed. And I just want to find some answers. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I see Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, there's a couple issues that are caused, I think were factors in the low voter turnout. One of them is mistakes in the list. Neither of my sons have lived in Brantford for over 5 years, and yet they both showed up at my place on the voters list. Obviously, they didn't vote because they don't live in Brantford, but there's people on the list that no longer live in Brantford, so they get counted in the vote total, and it drives the percentage down. Another factor that I heard at the door, a lot of people were upset with all the negativity in this last election from a particular group. And I think that turned some people off the voting process, the democratic process. And hopefully we can have a more civil election next time around and encourage people to get up and vote again that kind of became jaded because of all the negativity in this last election. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor McCreary.
I agree completely with Councillor Carpenter that he sure had a lot of whereases. And I suspect he had some help from staff because staff love those whereases as well. I agree completely that I think there's a necessity for us to see how we can encourage more folks to vote in municipal elections. And I agree with what Councillor Martin said. He and I both heard a lot of comments from people in the prior election about some of the negativity that was pervasive in this community these past 2 years. And it caused folks to stay home in some numbers. And Councillor Martin and I both saw that there were a number of folks on the voters list in Ward 3 that may have moved away or died in the last 4 years. And he's quite correct that the presence of those numbers probably increased the size of the voters list disproportionately, and the turnout perhaps suffered as a result of that. I also want to reiterate something that Councillor Carpenter said, that this is not to be taken and was not intended in any way to be a commentary on the work that our people did. I can recall wandering through this room a couple of times, looking at all our senior staff in here, learning how to run an election. And they were all, I thought they were maybe a little too excited at the prospect of working election day. But to come back to the resolution, I support this wholeheartedly. But I think, with all due respect, I think it misses the mark in terms of how we should proceed on this. We, of course, want to hear from the public about their experiences. And in fact, we've struck a committee to do just that, to review how we engage the public on all matters. But I really do think that the work that we seem to be pointed towards is work for our staff to be doing, for our staff to be looking at opportunities to maximize voter turnout, to look at things, the good ideas they've had through this process. They've all lived through this once now, some of them 2 or 3 times. And I'm sure they have the ideas of how we can get more folks out to the polls. And there's also an opportunity, I think, for us to look elsewhere to see how it may be done in other jurisdictions, and maybe not necessarily Ontario, because as Councillor Carpenter said, the low turnout in the past election seems to have been sort of endemic throughout the province. So without any disrespect to the mover, because I think he's done good work here, and I'd really like to see if anybody's ever had more whereases in a resolution than Councillor Carpenter did tonight. I think perhaps we could refer that to staff as well. But I think what I'd like to suggest, and I'll wait till everybody else has spoken on this, Madam Chair, is to send this to our staff to give them direction to get to work on Councillor Carpenter's good ideas right away. And it's going to take some time, probably quite some time, to look at their ideas, to look at ideas elsewhere, and come back to this council with some suggestions that we can incorporate into the next election, which will probably require maybe some investment over the next 4 years. So those are my comments, Madam Chair. Thank you.
We do have some other speakers, so I'll look back to you at the end. Councillor Hunt, please.
Yes, I certainly am pleased to second this, and I think we should look at this as an opportunity to do what I would call a debrief. So while the result may be that we find ways to increase voter turnout, but at the very least, some kind of a debrief as to maybe why voter turnout was so low and some options for improving voter turnout, which I think would be something that not only us as a municipality, but most municipalities in the province would certainly like to see as well. So we could be doing some groundbreaking work here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Samwell up next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was incredibly pleased to see this come forward. I think anytime that we have an opportunity to hear from our community is important, and I look forward to hearing what would encourage voters to turn out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Davis, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to, the voters list. I think we all saw problems with the voters list. And just so the public knows, our city staff don't prepare the voters list. It's actually given to them by MPAC, which is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation under the current system. And the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, well, their expertise is in assessing properties for property tax purposes. And so I'm very glad to hear the province for the next election is going to take the lists that I believe Elections Ontario prepares for Ontario provincial elections. And so hopefully that will result in a much more up-to-date list, because those that are in the business of producing election lists, which would be Ontario elections, will be doing it. My understanding, that's what's going to be happening. So that in and of itself will be a major change that's planned. I think that took place as a result of a lot of input from our lobby organization, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. And so far as the intent here of the resolution, I think it's an excellent resolution. I like the whereases, although I tend to agree with Councillor McCreary that we need to cast a pretty wide net to get the best possible advice about what can be done to improve the electoral system and improve voter turnout. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other speakers? Councillor McCreary.
Madam Chair, thank you. With your indulgence, I think what I'd like to do, and I hope it'll meet with the assent of the mover, because it's not intended to diminish by any means what's before us today. But I think what I'd like to do is refer this to staff with the direction that they undertake a fulsome analysis of voter turnout for 2022 and look to the public, candidates, members of council for their input as was outlined in the resolution before us, and to seek best practices elsewhere on this continent and on this planet, I guess, and to come back to council with a report which recognizes the desire of this council to improve voter turnout for 2026 and to also provide us with not only a report, but an outline of a work plan to begin to implement some of these things, including budgetary implications.
So we have a referral on the floor, just
And I believe
seconded
the
by
seconder is Councillor Martin.
Councillor Martin.
Okay.
Do you have all of that captured? Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yes.
Very good. So we have a referral on the floor and seconded, and I have Councillor Carpenter who would like to speak to the referral, the merits of the referral only, please.
Yeah, so the referral didn't have a timeline on it. Is the referral changing my resolution or is it adding a C to my resolution? I'm not clear at whether there's an addition and then a referral. We get
So
some clarification
a
on that?
referral would not have a timeline. It just merely indicates the body to which it will be referred to, as well as any additional information that is to be provided.
Yeah, so when does this come back to council?
Upon completion. So once staff has an opportunity to achieve what's before them, then they'll bring a report back to council. There's no timeline attached to it.
Okay, so that's my concern about the timeline, is that if there's no timeline, it doesn't have to come back. And sometimes referrals are referred into oblivion if there's no timeline attached to it. So I would like to add a timeline to that referral to the second quarter of 2023.
Is that
That's okay.
friendly?
It's friendly to the mover and an excellent suggestion, and it looks like the seconder's in agreement too.
You have that captured? Very good. Any other speakers? Councillor Van Tilburg.
Could you read the body of the referral to me, just so I'm clear on what's in it?
Perhaps we could see it on the screen so we could all.
You guys are gonna ask for that.
Yeah.
Through the chair, it's summarized, but hopefully reflecting appropriately what we're seeking in this.
Is that everything you had, Councillor Van Tilburg?
I'm good with it.
Okay. Any other speakers to the referral? Seeing none, we'll call the vote on the referral, please.
The motion to refer carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillor Secoli, Sullivan, Caputo, Sless, Martin, McCurry, Hunt, Carpenter, Samuel, and Van Tilburg.
Okay. This item's been referred to staff. Moving forward, we have item 7.4, and Councillor Sless, I understand you are going to read this advertisement, but that we don't vote on it. If you wouldn't mind reading it and.
Certainly. Did you want a seconder for that or?
No, we don't need.
Okay.
Thank you.
The city of Brantford is currently seeking volunteers to serve on the following committees, task force, and boards. The following: Brantford Accessibility Advisory Committee, Brantford Airport Board, Brantford Heritage Committee, Brownfields Community Advisory Committee, Committee of Adjustment, Control of Vicious Dogs Committee, and Economic Development, Tourism, and Cultural Initiatives Advisory Committee, Environmental and Sustainability Policy Advisory Committee, Planning Advisory Committee, Property Standards Committee, Police Services Board, Southwest Task Force. Interested citizens can find further information on these appointments, including recommended skill sets, mandates, and application forms on the city's website at brantford.ca, at Brantford City Hall during regular business hours, or by calling City Hall at 759-4150. The deadline for submitting completed application forms to the City Clerk's Department is 4:30 on Thursday, January 5th, 23. The deadline, I just said that, for Police Services Board and Committee of Adjustment, and 4:30 on Wednesday, January 18th, and for all other listed advisory committees. City Council wishes to ensure membership on the city's advisory board reflects the diverse nature of Brantford's population and invites all residents to consider these opportunities.
Thank you. As I mentioned, there's no vote on that item. So we have a few notice of motions, and please note to members of this committee that the notice of motion deadline for the next agenda meeting will be Thursday at 9 a.m. So I will call on Councillor Van Tilburg, item 8.1. Just read the title.
Retroactive 50%. There we go. Retroactive 50% fee refunds for holding zone removal application for 396 area.
Excellent. Thank you. I have Mayor Davis for item 8.2 and 8.3, please.
Yeah, 8.2, fire incident 321 Henry Street on October the 18th, 2022. And 8.3, via rail cancellations.
Very good. And I do have one on here. I won't relinquish the chair just to read it, but it's Oak Hill Drive, traffic calming and pedestrian crossovers. And this meeting is now adjourned. I'm going to use the gavel because I can.